Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo 本师释迦牟尼佛。南无本师释迦牟尼佛。南无本师释迦牟尼佛。Venerable Shengqing, Abbess of the Sandao Thang Temple, Venerable members of the Sangha, distinguished guests and friends, today I am very happy to be back in my own country of birth, to take part in the occasion, on this occasion of the launching of our Master of Studies program under the auspices of the Vidyacarana Buddhist resource. There will be further explanations on the Vidyacarana Buddhist resource, and we will have a chance to ask questions, more questions, on the course that we are launching. So, because of this special occasion, I feel that an appropriate sharing with you, right? Dhamma sharing is as I have entitled this talk. That is, I want to emphasize some very special features, very special contribution, unique contribution of the Buddha-Dharma in terms of education. Not only for the Buddhists, I think for mankind. For all sentient beings, we would say. Yeah. So I have entitled this simple discussion, presentation, In Search of Wisdom, Buddhist Creative Education. Right. So this is the context of my talk and the reason for my choosing this topic. Of course, I'm now talking about an ideal, and I must be humble that we are not making a claim that the course we are launching is the complete, to say the least, fulfillment of this ideal. But we need an ideal. We need an ideal to inspire us, to guide us. As Professor Eric Fromm, a famous Western psychology and psychoanalyst professor in the US, and of course he's no more now. And in my younger days, I was very much inspired by him, so I cannot help quoting him. As he says, he has some very powerful sentences that stick in my mind since my younger days. And one is that he says, the question is not religion or not, but which religion. I shall elaborate on this point, hopefully, in the course of my presentation. And the other equally powerful statement that lingers on in my mind is, the question is not ideal or not, but which ideal. In other words, the need for an ideal is rooted in man's very existence. And forgive me to stick to the word man. I don't want to show male chauvinism, but man here, in this context, stands for a human being. And of course includes others. all others, include the female as well. And I fully share the feelings that he has put into this statement. So today we are launching a Buddhist program in Malaysia, and I would say guided by the ideal of the Buddha's teaching as creative education, hence my subject, my topic. And of course we need to be humble. As I say, we make no claim, but we want to make clear that we do have an ideal, and that we have to continue to be mindful of this true Buddhist ideal and to continue to strive, to work hard, to struggle towards its realization. Okay, I talk about creative education, and let me define at the outset what I mean by that. My understanding of the education of Dharma, I want to use that word, and rather than the more traditional word Buddhism, I want to emphasize the true message of the Buddha. I want to emphasize the fact that to be a good Buddhist, to be a true Buddhist, we have to go directly back to the historical Buddha, which means we have to put aside all sectarian biases. We need to respect our own traditions. There's nothing wrong with having the different sects. I don't mean to propose a nullification of the different sects. Yeah? But whatever sect, whatever tradition that we belong to, we must try to feel and discern the Buddha's teaching directly. We must discern the Buddha directly. We must discern his true Dharma directly. And to do that, we have to put aside all prejudices of traditions. While respecting and loving and propagating our own tradition, we want to find the roots of the Dhamma in the Buddha, in his Dharma, so that our own tradition, whatever it is, comes to be authenticated. So this is my personal approach. And so therefore, I do not mind people just because of the way I emphasize. I have a Buddha from India, I have a Buddha from Sri Lanka, I spent many years in Sri Lanka, I wear the Theravada robe. And in Hong Kong and other places, they will brand me as a Hinayanist. I do not mind that. Yeah? But really speaking, I don't have any yana as such. Yeah? Which doesn't mean that I don't have a central emphasis on the historical Buddha. These 2 points have to be separated. So I'm going to talk about what I mean by then creative education. But at this moment, let me explain that by creative, I mean it is a system, inverted commas. Buddhism also should shy away from words like organization and system. I myself do. And, but sometimes we have to use, we are speaking in English. Unfortunately, we have to express within the limitation, linguistic, conceptual, even conditionings in the English system, and all we can do is to be mindful and to be sincere. So you can say there is a system that transforms, that's the word, transforms. Fundamentally and totally transform the learners. And when you say something is creative, you mean that through a creative activity, a brand new, not a stereotype product is produced. So when I say Dharma education is creative education. I mean that it transforms the total being of a learner into what, again I have to say, the new man. First, from the nature of an ordinary being. This is my English translation for the word Fan Phu, Pratakjana, or Putajana in Pali, yeah, into what Buddhism calls an Arya. An Arya is a new species, is a new man. And of course, the new man par excellence, as shown in the early Buddhism, is in fact the Buddha himself. So the whole system in the commons results in the production of what I call a new man. Hence, this is a system that is creative. And this is the main point I want to stress. And my title also begins with the phrase, in search of wisdom. So I need to explain a bit now on the concept of wisdom. By that English term, again it's an English term, right? I am referring to the Pali word panya. You can see that this is the word here. Or the Sanskrit prajna, pora in Chinese. You notice that even the great Chinese master Xuanzang very often did not translate the word prajna. Sometimes he does in some appropriate context. When he wants the term to denote the meaning of understanding, like in Abhidharma, for instance, even in Yogacara, and he does use a hui or zhi hui. But very often, you can see this word in Chinese, pora. Because this means that the Buddhist conceptions go far beyond what can be adequately, correctly rendered in other languages, even including ancient Chinese, and less still, I would say, in English. So, but of course, perhaps the best word in English is still wisdom. So I entitled the first part of the talk as in search of wisdom. And so by that wisdom, I mean this prajna or panya. And panya or prajna in the different traditions connotes, this word connotes both the intellectual understanding and also what we may call spiritual insight. I'm still using many words that are admittedly ambiguous, like spiritual. I have no time to dwell on these renderings, but simply put, by spiritual I mean something that transcends, that go beyond the intellectual, the conceptual, and even the psychological, the philosophical, as understood in the modern systems. So panya connotes both intellectual understanding and as well as spiritual insight. The profoundest mode of spiritual insight being, of course, the enlightenment of the Buddha. And you see this dual connotation in the Pali word panya, for instance, in the context of what is called the Panchindriya, the 5 spiritual faculties. This is a very important doctrine. And most, Buddhists take it to be too easy, so easy that they think they know because they recite, they chant this formulation, but without understanding the profound implication, the message in the doctrine of the 5 spiritual faculties. I believe that it is a guiding principle for us. In Mingxing, we want to emphasize the integration of Buddhist studies and Buddhist practice. We do not think that they have to be completely divorced from each other. And we try to show this, we try to express this in the way we design our courses. I hope we can make a humble, unique contribution in this manner. Yeah? So the increasing of practice and understanding is an important message, important teaching that we can find in this doctrine called the five faculties. Again, I don't have time to elaborate on all this. And this is one, this is in Theravada. In the Sarvastivada, and also of course in the Mahayana Vivacharas, the word prajna also connotes the meaning, connotes intellectual understanding, as well as the perfected prajna of the Buddha. Right? So then Buddhist, the Dharma, education, as I said, is creative education, and creative education means transformation, and transformation requires wisdom, hence in search of wisdom. So a few words on wisdom now. I have said that is, I believe, even though the English word cannot do justice to the meaning of prajna. The first thing we have to point out is that prajna or panya must be appreciated and understood or even practiced in its proper context. This means that we cannot isolate panya or prajna, abstract it out of the whole context of the threefold teaching as Sheila, Samadhi, prajna, Jie Ding Hui in Chinese. Yeah. Just like in recent years, I've been emphasizing a lot about meditation, and I want to show that meditation must not be misunderstood, misrepresented as just a mere technique, or as solving your stress problem or your depression problems. And all these are good things, yeah, to be aware of these human problems and to be motivated to want to overcome them. I think it's a positive sign, but in this process, we must not understand meditation as something abstracted, out of context. And that context is Sheila, Samadhi, Prajna. Buddhist meditation is not Buddhist meditation unless it is within this context. Prajna, likewise, is not prajna in the Buddhist sense, or what I believe to be the Buddha's teaching of prajna, unless it is a prajna within the totalistic context of the threefold training, Sheila, Samadhi, Prajna. So also, I take the opportunity to say a few words about then Sheila and Samadhi and Prajna. First of all, Sheila. And I think most Buddhists are used to understanding it to mean a list of do and don't, a list of rules. But I want to emphasize, in the context of creative, in the context of the Dharma as creative education, that I see this as, in the way I term it, the tuning in. The tuning is an act. And that act is a striving, and is expressed in body, speech, and mind. So, and this is Sheila, tuning into the holy and sacred through inspiration. That is the emulation of the systematic, or the systematic alignment with the nature of holiness, sacredness, perfection. We see a Buddha, we see a holy person, we see a worthy teacher, yeah, even a spiritual friend, and we discern directly the wonderful holy virtue, sacred virtue within that person. For instance, the Buddha, to take an extreme case. When you bow to the Buddha, that's why we need ritual. Ritual is extremely important. As another misunderstanding in Buddhism, to say that the Buddha speaks of rites and ritual attachment as a fetter. I have explained of all these things in other contexts. I don't have much time, but maybe in the question and answer I can explain more if you want to know. So when we worship a Buddha, we feel directly inspired by the Buddha. We see humanity perfected in him. We see the virtues of, talking about holiness, sacredness. We see his perfection in wisdom, in compassion, in purity, in sincerity, in fearless. We are just overwhelmed. We should be overwhelmed. Learn to be overwhelmed with these inspiration. So we want to aspire for it. This is what I mean by tuning in. You align yourself. You are at a distance from the state of Buddhahood. But you want to commit yourself to move forwards, to reduce the system until the distance until it becomes zero. Until you also, within you, all these innate human qualities. After all, if we said that the Buddha nature is within us, then we must realize that all these positive virtue and qualities are all within us, including Buddhahood. And we want to unfold them. We want to unfold the human potential to the highest. So by first tuning in, what can I do if I align myself in this manner, if I tune into Buddha's state of holiness or sacredness? Then you can find out what to do, how to orientate yourself. Of course, under the guidance of the Dhamma as the frame of orientation. You don't have to be told. The system says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You must observe these precepts, and or 227 precepts. Of course, I'm not saying these rules, training rules are not important. They are very, very important, but in Buddhism they are training rules. They are not commandments. You have to feel from within you, you have to externalize your yearning from within you and express it outside. And this is Sheila. Yeah, so Sheila for me is the tuning into the sacred holiness. In Chinese, I often quote the phrase, 见贤思齐. When you see a virtuous person, you want to emulate that person. You want to move in the same direction of development, inner development as that person. I think it's close to the Buddhist concept of Sheila. By the way, Sheila, the fundamental meaning of Sheila is not precept. Even in the Pali and Sanskrit, it means the nature. So you want to acquire the nature of the holy, of sacred. Hence you behave in a certain way. Hence you want, in fact, even happily accept the precept, the training rules. Samadhi, for now, at least I want to point out that the English translation of concentration is far from being enough. And sometimes it can be distorting. You know, you see most books in English discussing on Eightfold Path, and they take the whole combination of this spiritual path to Buddhahood as just right concentration. It's very unfortunate. You practice, strive, struggle for your whole life just to gain the right concentration. And what do you mean by right anyway, as opposed to wrong? Have you ever reflected on this? So samadhi, what I'm getting at in the Buddha's teaching of the Noble Path, is far more than just right understanding, right concentration. Of course, concentration is definitely an important meaning of samadhi. It is more like perfect or proper. Samma has that kind of connotation, samyak in Sanskrit. a perfect integration, perfect unification. The whole being comes to be fully unified, integrated. Even in psychology, it speaks of the integration of the personality. And through the Buddhist path, you culminate in that, and that's on the basis of that, Panya or Pratya shines forth. That's the combination. It's not just right understanding, right concentration. I shall have more to say in the context a bit later of the fourfold samadhi. And I also don't want to make this lecture too heavy, but I do mean to present it in a little bit more formalistic way because we are launching an academic program. Yeah, of course, bearing in mind our emphasis. As for pratya, I have already said, it is not just intellectual understanding. You can say that pratya, in the true sense, is at its high level, is nothing less than the liberating wisdom. I had to add the word liberating. So it's not just intellectual knowledge, and this is attained. Now this pratya is an important stress in my talk. You can see that in search of wisdom. And this wisdom, in the sense that I have defined and explained, is or can only be attained through the instrumentality of Sheila and Samadhi. Hence, these three things have to be considered together. We don't talk about the wisdom, the cleverness of the Buddhists and Buddhism. You can go easily one-sided. That's why, unfortunately, in some traditional Buddhist institutions, educational institutions, I don't mean to make negative criticism, but I do have to point out that in many of institutions that I have seen, there's too much emphasis on panya as intelligence and intellectual achievement, and so the young novices have to work hard and prepare for one exam after another. The whole system is a machinery to mass-produce the pandits, mass-produce the scholars. I hope to stress a point that this is not the pratya in Buddhism that I'm talking about when I say in search of wisdom. Now, then, except for samadhi, I have said something and I hope to supplement that. Let me come back to Sheila and pratya a little bit more. Sheila. I have said that Sheila is the tuning in, the emanation, tuning into, aligning, emanation of the innate, developed spiritual virtues of the saints. Here, I like to quote one sutra. I have started with Theravada. You have seen my emphasis there. And one of my points in today's short presentation, I hope it's not going to be very long. I have the bad habit of dragging on, and you have to stop me. But I want to also demonstrate that really to understand the important teaching of the Buddha, you have to go beyond, as I said, sectarian boundaries, which means that we must assess the different traditions, like the Mahayana Sutra, the Tibetan text, and so on. Not just the Pali text. However important they are as the basis of the true Dhamma. So I'm here quoting, I cannot help quoting one sutra called the Druma Kinara Raja Paripricha. Paripricha means questioning. And you can see the Chinese, I think you're more familiar with the Chinese. It's a very interesting sutra. You know why? Because I'm going to talk about it a little bit more, why it's interesting, but let me come back to this profound statement. And in a stanza, in a song, singing out, a question is asked, about the bodhicitta. That is the will for universal enlightenment. And this profound statement is made. It says, on account of the bodhicitta, one becomes endowed with the Sheila. So it's on account of bodhicitta that one comes to be endowed with the Sheila, not on account of being a good, obedient Buddhist, obedient to your tradition, to your society, to your temple, No, it's about the bodhicitta. You can see the Tibetan I have quoted here. Changchuk Sem Ki, Chu Kim Te. Changchuk Sem is the bodhicitta. Ki is the instrumental. Through Changchuk Sem, one comes to be endowed with Chu Kim, and that is Sheila. If you look at the Chinese, it's clear. 有其善心便有境界，戒是菩提心。有其善心便有境界。Not because of, as I say, obedience or any other factor or authority, or even respect, which of course we need, but Buddhist precept is truly Buddhist precept. It comes from your heart, and this is the heart of compassion, the heart of the bodhicitta in this context. And when you go to the Chinese sources also, for instance, I quote another source called the Mahavibhasha, and although this is not Theravada, but it's a very, very close branch of Theravada. It's called the Sarvasivada. And they have a very important commentary called the Mahavibhasha, and that exists only in Chinese. So there is a statement like this. It talks about the sutra, the Vinaya, and the Abhidhamma. And Vinaya is what I call the emanation of great compassion. Deng Liu is Nishanta. That means flowing out, outflowing emanation. Just ponder over this point. What do they want to say? Vinaya, usually people think Vinaya means so many rules. Again, rules. Don't do and do. No, it speaks of, look at it, linking up of compassion within you and the Vinaya. What is Vinaya? Vinaya flows out from great compassion. Vinaya actually is compassion. If you like, it's a subset of great compassion. It's very, very profound. And also, in another place, the same text says that the great compassion, what is the fundamental nature, what it is in the final analysis, in other words. I don't want to expound on Abhidhamma today, but this is the meaning of intrinsic nature. It is wisdom. Great compassion, wisdom. It's not just a sentiment, just an emotion. So all this shows the importance of the inner dimension of our so-called Sheila in Buddhism. Okay, so it means that no truly wisdom-oriented education is possible unless our emotions, that is compassion, volition, wanting your enlightenment not just for yourself but for all beings, to solve the problem of humanity. That's why the Buddha, historical Gautama the Buddha, or Siddhartha, he left the home not just for his own sake. He was pondering about the universal phenomena of sufferings, of old age and death. The whole story of the four sights. He knew there is a fundamental, if you like, existential problem rooted in humans' existence. And he left the home because of this concern, not just for their own sake, not as an escape, but as a transcendence, as an effort to transcend. Yeah? So today we have what is called the Dhamma, we have what is called the creative education. So wisdom meditation is not possible unless our emotion and volitions are deeply involved at the deepest existential level. And this is far beyond the domain of mere ordinary intellectual or moral training. And this is what, it's from this perspective that I speak of the Dharma as education, right, as creative education. Right, so now I want to give an example coming back to the Pali sources. What is then the difference? Can we see in a concrete way the difference between Panya in the sense of spiritual liberative wisdom, spiritual wisdom, and conceptual understanding, which is not Prajna, as I've just said? I shall here quote a story in the Pali Canon, very inspiring story called, on this practitioner called Bahia. You know, this is very interesting. Bahia was a merchant. He didn't have a background of Buddhist training. He was not a monk. He had never met the Buddha. It looks like from the description he never heard any preaching. So as a merchant, he went out on business trips. And once, to cut the story short, there was a shipwreck. He made a shipwreck and he was floating, and then finally he reached a land. I think it's said to be somewhere near the modern Bombay or somewhere like that. And there he lived a very simple life. You know, he didn't have any things. So he survived on the barks of trees to cover himself, and then he had to go out begging. Yeah? He had no job, no money, nothing. And as he was doing that, he came to be respected by the villagers and said, oh yes, how holy and sacred this person is. You know, a life of detachment. Yeah? And then they came to believe that he was Arahant. That belief itself also is a conceptual belief, conceptual understanding. And this interesting thing is that he himself came to believe that he already attained the Arahut. So, in his mind, Arahut or enlightenment, right, was arrived at conceptually. Of course, you can see that extremely in a very sincere manner. And then he was reminded by Devata, you know, a divine being who was one of his former relative, and that Devata felt sorry for this misunderstanding, this conceptual understanding of Arahut and so on. And told him, look, you are not an Arahant. You have not attained Arahut. And Bahia was extremely worried in his mind. But he had decided that Arahut was the ideal. We're talking about, we're talking today about an ideal they were going to strive after. So, this is in terms of, we're talking about education. But Bahia he was inspired by the ideal very firmly in his mind, and he wanted to know where can he find a way to true Arahanthood. So the devil said, yeah, look, there is a Buddha, there is the Buddha, yeah, he is truly enlightened. He's the best of Arahant. Go and ask for his special instructions. But the Buddha is living there, then you have to go there. And the story goes that Bahia could not stop even on that very night, the evening, and he had to travel until he reached that place before he could pause and stop. Very interesting story, but this is to show you that you can say that he was completely motivated. And to borrow a word of another famous modern thinker, modern psychology professor, Professor Abraham Maslow, I think you know him. and he speaks of metta motivation. Metta means something higher, yeah. In contrast to what is called basic motivation, yeah. Metta needs, in contrast to what is called basic need. And man is motivated and not just by basic needs of food and so on, but something higher, for truth, for the holy, for the sacred, for the beautiful. We have that need. And that's where religion comes in. That's why it's important to be in the domain of religion. So he met the Buddha and said, Venerable Sir, our life is brief, and I really feel the impermanence of sentient existence. I'm just paraphrasing it a bit. And he says, I may die even today, and even the Venerable Sir, when you go out also, you don't know, you might meet with an accident. Therefore, please, I beg you to give me a teaching right now. Not a profound, long discourse on dependent origination or anything like that, but I want a teaching that I can practice right now. I promise that I will devote all my energies and my whole being into it. And then finally, Buddha was backing, and the practice is that he never answered a question when he was backing. But there was another practice of the Buddha, another principle, that if somebody asks a question 3 times, showing the sincerity of the questioner, he would break this principle. And that's also one feature of his creativity. He's not rigid. The Buddha that I have understood was never bound by any system as such. That's why when I talk about system just now, I say inverted commas. Yeah? Anyway, so it's a very, very interesting story. You can read up. And then Buddha turned around and said, okay, listen to me carefully. Train yourself like this. In seeing, only seeing. This is just one possible way of translating the profound sense. Ditte, ditta matang bhavisat. They will only be, in seeing, they will only be seeing. In hearing, in sensing, in cognizing, likewise. Can you get the message? It's a teaching of pure perception, pure awareness, in which there is no duality between the seer and the seen, the perceiver and the perceived. You become one with the object. The problem with us, why we are not enlightened, why we are trapped in samsara, is because as soon as our mind operates, right, we cannot help bifurcating into subject-object, internal, external. And when you have you as a seer and the seen, the knower and the known, then the host of problems will emerge. So you have attachment, sensual craving to objects that you like, you want to belong to you, whether it's a person, whether it's money, whether it's reputation, yeah? And you have also hatred, anger. A nation doesn't share my value and views. Now today you read the newspaper, this is how these politicians in the world, I don't believe them. I don't trust any politician of any party. Yeah? They'll say, yeah, if you follow our system, the world must prevail in our system. We don't want another person to come and change the world order. Why not? If it happens that their order is favored by the majority of others, but the thing is, they don't allow others, to be different from them, from their system. This is what they call ditti in Pali, views, one-sidedness, and that comes about because of the bifurcation of mind. And this is the working of the intellect, and this is how it differs from wisdom. If I don't have time to elaborate later, let me say that wisdom is non-bifurcating. Wisdom transcends object and subject. Wisdom allows us, enables us to see directly into reality. The word is yathabhutam, 如实, truly as it is. We don't do that. We cannot do that. We must be humble. Even with all my talking, I can't do that, at least most of the time, except in my meditation. Yeah? As soon as we pursue something, in no time, almost literally, right? Our mind begins to bifurcate and we get into trap. Like Venerable Yananda has illustrated so well in his book called Concept and Reality. Yeah, we are trapped, according to Buddha, according to the Madhupindika Sutta, by what is called papancha, in Sanskrit prapancha, shilun. This proliferation of conceptual understanding, or this is what I want, or this differs from my view, this is bad, this is my enemy, this is my friend. We have all the problems. Anyway, so our mind is always conditioned, positively, hopefully sometimes, most of the time negatively. And the ideal of wisdom, Buddhist wisdom, is to transcend this conditioning so that we are truly free in the true sense. You know, you go out and you see some, you go to the supermarket and you have decided in your mind what are the good products to buy because you have seen them in advertisements, or you think you have made the best decision, but very often at least, to be honest, you have been conditioned by the advertisement, by the signboards, by the introductions that you have read. So we are all conditioned. But of course we also need positive conditioning to overcome negative conditioning. So the ideal is, in Buddhist wisdom, we go beyond conditioning. That's true freedom. That's true liberation. So this is what the Buddha means in seeing only the seen, or only seeing in hearing, and so on. In all our perceptual situations. So it is said that thereupon, while Bahya was still seated, he gained breakthrough. Yeah? So, in brief, we can say that earlier, when Bahya thought or Bahya understood that he was an Arahant, that was conceptual. Right? In spite of his extreme sincerity. And then we have to be careful. I think most of us, I'm sure, are sincere. But sincerity alone is not enough. And we apply the same principle to the understanding of the Buddha's teaching. Yeah? So that is conceptual. And he would have been, although he was not exposed to Buddhism according to the story, but later on he would have reflected, he would have heard from the villagers, and he came to have a certain understanding, oh yes, I am Arahant. That's what Arahant is. Yeah? But when he, after practicing this brief spiritual instruction by the Buddha, when he became truly enlightened, liberated, the wisdom he gained is wisdom in the true sense. So this is a story that beautifully illustrates the difference between conceptual understanding and wisdom that we are talking about. I believe that the Dhamma of the Buddha, or the Dharma, again, forgive me to use a Sanskrit word, this is not sectarian, this is just in the hope of being more inclusive. I hope you understand that. Yeah, that distinguishes the Buddha-Dharma as what we call creative education. It is this wisdom that transforms. That's a very important word, transforms. Not intellectual understanding. Think of, for instance, modern psychology. You know, they also say, psychotherapists say, well, you won't change yourself. It doesn't matter how much you understand intellectually, but unless you come to they say insight into yourself. What really happened to you, maybe in childhood or maybe whatever, yeah? Then when you have true insight, then you begin to change. The psychotherapist cannot change you, but he can lead you to a direct understanding of yourself. Well, this is only a small example, but you amplify this, you will see what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it is true spiritual insight, as taught in the Dharma, of course. We believe that it is in the Buddha's Dharma that truly transforms, and that's what makes Buddhist education creative. Just now I talked about then transformation is a very important word, and creative because the Buddhist Dharma education produces a new man. New is creative. Yeah? And it means that he is man perfected. He is the human who fully unfolded the potential to the highest. I talk in the manner of what we call humanistic Buddhism as a humanistic religion. And then he was the word fully transformed. And now we come to the words that we use in our center called Vidyacarana Sampanna. Why I use this word? What's the meaning of this? Vidyacarana, Pali Vidyacarana Sampanna. You can see the Chinese, you can see the Tibetan there. It's in all traditions because it's one of the major epithets of the Buddha. Yeah? This concept, Vidyacarana, right, signifies the ideal of perfect integration of our knowing and our being. Our knowing and being come to be one. But in us, when we don't have wisdom, as I said, our understanding and hence our behavior, guided by our understanding, controlling our understanding, makes us different. Our knowing is not our being. Do you know what I mean? You know something that is good, wholesome, but you can't do it. You fail. You know something that is not wholesome, but you cannot help, letting it happen. And this is, you might even say, a human tragedy. And that's why, in Christianity, St. Paul is said to have expressed this, exclaimed something to the effect that what I know, that I do not. So, what you know is one thing, what you do or don't do is a different thing. There is always a split. So it's a split. And it's a split between reason and emotion, of knowing and being. But in the case of Buddha, I'm using this word to express the ideal of creative education. The final product of the new man is a person who is fully integrated in terms of your understanding, which is wisdom, and what he does is what he knows. What he knows, he will do. So the Buddha doesn't tell himself, I can't hate another person, because he can't possibly hate. I must not kill. No, he can't possibly kill. His compassion is a natural, spontaneous outflow from his inner wisdom of, in terms of early Buddhism, of no selfness or emptiness. So in this way, this word represents full integration, harmonization of all our conflicts, of emotions and understanding, the intellect, the brain, and the heart. And hence I choose this term, 明心, in this. Right. We're going to see then next that I've said the Buddha is the new man in this creative Dharma as creative education. He was guided throughout his life and he became the Buddha, and then he preaches. He transforms us. The word is transformation through the Dharma that he has discovered. Dharma means truth. It also means the Buddha's teaching, because what he teaches coincides with truth. And you can say, one fundamental method, right, to emphasize this whole point about creativity, the whole point about Dharma as creative education. The one word that I want to emphasize is, I've said just now, inspiration. The Buddha teaches through inspiration, not by force, not by authority. I'm going to expand on this. And the Buddhist inspiration teaching, not just seen the Buddha, but in the great disciples and the great teachers throughout Buddhist history in different traditions, right, includes various forms. Here I just give a few examples. So inspiration is not to be understood as being confined to the examples I give, but just to show you some inspiration method. One is the use of similes. That is an attempt to defy this ordinary mode of conveying important point, conveying truth through conceptual discussion, arguments, and long discourses. Often the Buddha uses similes, because similes, legends, stories go directly to your mind without going through via a different medium, the intellectual conceptual medium. Yeah. So you can see similes abound in the Pali Suttas, and also, of course, in the Chinese Agamas and Mahayana, much more so. And then, coming back to even in the Pali Sutta, you see many verses like the Dhammapada. They are all inspiring. You have a Dhamma near you, and when you are in trouble, when you are depressed, or when you are excited, you flip, open the book, and you find some inspiration there that guides you as to what to do as a Buddhist, as a follower of the Buddha. And they're all in verses. Udana is another example. These are called breathe out verses of the Buddha. The Buddha inspired, without being asked, he expresses his shares. His shares is joy in the truth that he is experiencing. In stanza, the important is poems. Yeah? And so on. Then another example in other tradition is the Darshanika masters that we see in the school I refer to called the Sarvastivada. These Darshanikas are also good, you might say, Pandits. They are well versed in the Buddha teaching, but they are more characterized by their use of similes, legends, and I believe in ancient time there must have been songs, stories, etc. Art. They did not hesitate to employ all these means, what we call artistic means, to express the. At the same time, interesting thing is the Darshanika masters, they are serious meditators. They're not just popular preachers. You just make jokes all the time, and you say you have a good sense of humor, and there may be no substance in what they're trying to say in terms of the. It's not like that. Yeah. They want to inspire people to practice meditation and to understand the Buddha's teaching, but they do this predominantly through storytelling, singing, and so on, and music, etc. Okay, talking about music, I cannot again have. I have referred to one sutta called the Druma Kinara Raja Prapicha. The Chinese is more given to you. You know why this is interesting? Because this is a sutra. It's not very long, right? That is mostly in verses. But the more interesting thing is that, right? In these verses, you see two groups of bodhisattvas. One group is about sing, literally through singing, the Dharma question, profound questions, and that of course is said to be magically inspired by the Buddha. And the other group answers again through singing. And this is the power of art, of performing art, of music. And these are all interesting, extremely interesting illustration of the creativity of the Dhamma. Again, I had no time to address the issue as to whether the Buddha in fact himself encouraged this. I believe that the Buddha had no objection to this. And it's also a question of time and space and so on. But I don't have time to go too deeply into this. But what I've shown you is, these are the facts preserved in Buddhist literature, not my own fabrication. Look into this, beautiful. Venerable Yin has given a small commentary on this, but of course not a full presentation, but you can see some of these features. I have talked about this in my MA lectures and even the diploma lectures in the courses that we are conducting in Hong Kong. Yeah. That I hope can serve as an inspiration for you to want to join our courses. We are not perfect. Certainly, I don't think of myself as the best scholar, Buddhist scholar, but we do want to contribute in some unique way. Okay, so, right, this word inspiration is very important and it characterizes the Buddha teachings. And I will give a few examples. Again, coming back to the Pali canons. In the Majjhima Nikaya, there's a sutta which brings out this point very well. It is said, for instance, that the Buddha, very interesting fact, again, not my fabrication, you look at the Pali text, look at the Chinese text, you see that it is stated in all traditions that at the beginning the Buddha did not even impose a single disciplinary rule. He's not. The Buddha that I have understood, that I have discerned, that I am discerning continuously, is not the Buddha interested in system and rules. I'm sorry if I've offended some Buddhists. Yeah, rules have their importance. Yeah, systems also have their ready importance. They guide us, and so on. But fundamentally speaking, the Buddha is not a person interested in any system or rule. He said, I've never been a leader. I've never considered myself a leader. I'm not authoritarian. Hate of any institution. The Mahaparinibbana Sutta. That's what he declares. So here the Buddha says, let me read out the translation to you. He said, at one time, the bhikkhus truly gladdened my mind. He felt very satisfied and happy at one time. At one time means in the Buddha's time. In other words, as time went on, there was deterioration, even the Sangha even mentioned in the time of the Buddha himself. So at least at the earlier stages, this is what we can understand, the bhikkhus truly could make the Buddha happy. Why? Because they said, let me continue, I address the bhikkhus, I eat at one single sitting. In so doing, I experience good health and comfort. The Buddha had never imposed a rule saying, you can't eat after exactly 12 or 12:20 in some countries nowadays. And after that, you can only have cheese, you can only have this and that. The Buddhist training system become very rigid and formalistic. The Buddha never imposed a rule like that. Of course, I'm not saying that these rules are not useful, extremely useful. In my younger day, I must say, for instance, now we have a venerable from the One For Lin system, and I was there not long before this venerable. And in my younger day, I was in Jinshan Shi in Los Angeles, the Good Mother Monastery, for almost a year. And there I practiced with them, having only one meal. I'm not just trying to boast or show I don't have any virtue, but I just want to say that I have gone through this. And in my years in Sri Lanka, I observed the precept of not eating alone. Today, today, I don't observe this properly, but I keep, for various reasons, this principle in my mind. Anyway, so the Buddha was not one who said, you have to do like this, exactly you cannot do like that, this rule, that rule. That's what makes the Dhamma creative, inspiring. He inspires. And he's sharing experience. Look, the Buddha said, I eat one meal a day, and I felt very light and happy, and I could do my meditation very well, successful. Come, you too eat a single meal at a single sitting. And you will experience good health and comfort. He's sharing and inspiring. And he said, I'm still translating. I had no need of instructing them. I don't give any instruction, don't do this, do this. I had only to arouse mindfulness in them. I give the Pali words, if you can, it's not difficult, you can understand them. I am quoting Pali sources. I'm not quoting Mahayana sources. I'm not making excuses. I'll let you see. If you have faith in the Buddha, if you have faith in the Pali Canon, then you have to understand what the Buddha was teaching. What came to be formalized, maybe over-formalized, to sometimes unfortunately become rigid, to be rigid, in the Theravada tradition, for instance, or in the Mahayana tradition, for that matter, is a matter of traditions. We respect them. We respect them. But what we want, however, is the Buddha's true teaching, true Dharma. So, and then from that example of eating only one meal a day, and then he goes on, the next interesting part also here. Therefore, bhikkhus, abandon the unskillful and devote yourself to the skillful states. What is wholesome, cultivate the wholesome. What are unwholesome, cultivate. In other words, now he generalized this, and he wants to inspire the bhikkhus. He's not saying, you must, you cannot. But he said, like the way I'm sharing my experience of eating one meal a day as a practice, right? You apply that to the whole spiritual life. What is it? Do no good, right? Do all good, right? Abandon evil. So Buddha is not giving, even at that time, and he was referring to earlier time, of course, when he said his mind was threatened. For in this way, see how he inspires and how he encourages, you will attain to the growth and development in this Dhamma Vinaya. So you want spiritual growth? Not by following rules and not through obedience. Buddhism is not characterized by obedience, unlike in other religions. You read the story of Adam and Eve, you know it's a story of obedience. Buddhism is a religion of inspiration. And this is the word I want to stress today. And then of course, this word, in this Dhamma Vinaya, I want to say a couple of words about Dhamma Vinaya. Usually, people understand this to mean, the sutras and the rules again, the Vinayas. And I have explained to you, even the Abhidhammikas in ancient times understood Vinaya is an emanation, an outflowing of compassion. So, Dhamma Vinaya, of course, in some context, perhaps relatively a little bit later context, it does mean Sutta and the Vinayas, and understood that way. But not, I would say, not the primary denotation of the term. Dhamma Vinaya is one of the words I would choose for what I'm calling creative education. It's a whole system of training. You devote yourself. You want to renounce yourself under a certain Dhamma Vinaya. It means a certain spiritual system. So if you want spiritual growth, do like this. And Buddha is just encouraging. Okay, so this is one example of the Buddha as, you might say, the inspirer par excellence. Talking about Dhamma Vinaya, I give you another quote again from the Pali Canon. Here the Buddha says, O bhikkhus, the Dhamma Vinaya are well expounded. You are familiar with the chanting. Swakata Bhagavata Dhammo. Now here, of course, it includes Dhamma Vinaya. Look, Dhamma Vinaya is a term by itself, standing for the totality of the Buddha's teaching. It's not just to be split into suttas and Vinaya rules. No, it shouldn't be that. And the more important part is that what is meant when it is said that the Dhamma Vinaya, the Vinaya are well expounded. In the Pali, of course, you have the plural case, accusative, Dhamma Vinaye, Swakate. He said like this, he elaborated. He who inspires, this is the word inspires. This is my translation, of course, Samadapeti, and sometimes it occurs as Samadapeti, a short A, sometimes long A. The one, he who inspires, and the one whom he inspires, and the one who being inspired practices accordingly. That's how we are all transformed. Through the whole system of, through the totality of the Buddha's teaching, i.e. Dhamma Vinaya. So this is creative education. It involves the person who inspires, the teacher. The student who is inspired, and the one who being inspired, right, goes on to practice according to the inspiration. All of them beget much merit. Of course, you understand what it means by getting much more merit. Recently, in one of my Cardinal talk, I talk about merit, and I cannot spend time on this. It means, in brief, that we are all profoundly, greatly, spiritually benefited. It leads to spiritual benefit. Why is that? Oh, on account of the Dhamma being well expounded. See the word? Just now you have Dhamma Vinaya, and then in the next sentence is Dhamma. So clearly Dhamma Vinaya is actually Dhamma. This is what I will explain to you. It becomes our courses. Right? What are the major characteristics of the, to be more concrete, about the Buddhist inspirational teaching? Now introduced to 4 words. Yeah? And you see these 4 terms occurring everywhere in the Pali Sutta and also in the Chinese. First of all, the Chinese is easier. Shi, Jiao, Li, Xi. You see in the Chinese sutras everywhere, especially in the Agama sutras. Right? In the Pali, this system called Santasati, Samadapeti, Samutejeti, Sampahangsati. Let me give you just so many places. You see this. The Buddha goes to a village and and teaches Dhamma, and he teaches in this fourfold way. Yeah. Santasati means to show, to instruct, right? To point out, to reveal. This is one. 就是 in Chinese. The second one, Samadapeti, or Samadapeti sometimes, means to, I think this corresponds better to the term inspiration that I'm getting at. He inspires, so he instructs, he shows you how you should practice, how you should live, and so on. And he inspires. In his teaching, always not just instructing, but inspiration is always there, not separated. Then third one, the third word, li, means he sharpens literally. And it is a good translation of the Pali and Sanskrit. The Samutejeti, from teach. To sharpen, to inflame. He inflames you, he excites you, and make your mind sharpen in his teaching. And then he gladdens. So not just instruction. This is an authoritative teacher. He does teach you. He has to teach you. Right? He will show you the way. But at that very time, he inspires you, he brightens up, inflames you, he makes you happy. Nowadays, I think in traditional Buddhism, there's too much talk about seriousness. We have to be serious. I hope I'm not misunderstood to advocate the lack of seriousness. Please don't quote me out of context. But I want to show you, I'm quoting the Pali text, the Orthodox so-called tradition. And you see the Buddha in his characteristic way of teaching, true inspiration is true in these four moods. It always includes the element of inspiring and brightening and gladdening, making everyone happy. So this is not what I'm saying is not just say, oh yes, another tradition is different. They had a way of looking at things, and we are not like that. We are serious, you know. And we have to be serious. It doesn't mean that they are not. The other traditions are not serious. But if you talk about the Buddha's teaching, the Dhamma, the key element of inspiration, of making the learner happy, you can't deny that. I'm quoting you the Pali words themselves. Okay? So here's a story like this. You know, in the Buddha's time, there were some what you might call, you know, some scholarly people, the so-called philosophers. They might be described as sophists. They're always ready to refute other systems. Right? And they are very clever. They understand the other system first, and then they go and challenge the representative of the other system. So they are said to be people who are well versed in the theory of others. I'm quoting the Pali words, and who are sharp as hair-splitting marksmen. Vada Vedi Rupa. Vedi is piercing, you know, piercing the, you know, the horsemen, they can shoot very, very sharply. So they are so sharp, so educated, so sophisticated. Yeah? So they heard about the Buddha coming. And they said, And they discuss among themselves, let us prepare ourselves, you know, formulate some questions so that we can challenge Gautama, challenge him. And if he answers this way, then we will bring out a question in that way. If answered that way, we bring out a question in this way. So the aim is to show his contradiction, to defeat him. So they were all ready, right? And then they went to the Buddha. And by the time, however, when they saw the Buddha, and after exchange of, some discussions, they simply were so inspired, that's a word, so overwhelmingly inspired, that they forgot about challenging him anymore. You know what they did? They bowed themselves down and said, Venerable Sir, from today onwards, I want to take refuge under you. I want to be a disciple until my death. You know, they started off as sophisticated philosophers and sophists, but end up humbly as the followers, disciples, committed disciples of the Buddha. And that's through the inspiration of the Buddha. This is what we see everywhere. It says, having been instructed, inspired, brightened, and gladdened, these are the four characteristics, by Gautama, they do not ask him any question at all, lest still get him into dispute. Getting him into dispute is my translation. Only that, they end up as the Buddhas, as Gautama's disciples. This is a very vivid, concrete illustration of the Buddha as the inspirer par excellence. And this is what I mean by creative educator or creative education. About in search of wisdom, I can say that it started in the Buddha's own time, not in Mahayana, not in Abhidharma, in Buddha's own time. Recently I gave a talk, since I'm running out of time, organized by the University of Oxford and under the auspices of their Department of Honor Study. Please refer to that talk. But I want to show you there, I explained that in the Buddha's own time, the Arhat themselves, for instance, Sariputta Parikshit himself was already pondering the question, what is the difference between my wisdom and the Buddha's wisdom? Clearly the Buddha's wisdom is perfect. But in what way, to what extent, and how? You know, these were in their mind. The Arhats themselves admitted that, felt that. Yeah? And that went on. You can see in the Pali commentaries, you can see in the Abhidharma, and I spent a lot of time on this. And they developed a notion called the non-defined nations. I have no time to elaborate on this. this is just to show you that they're trying to find out a concrete answer to that question in their mind. Why the Buddha is perfect that we are not? Then one of the theories brought forward by the Abhidhamma people is that even the Arahats had what is called the non-defined ignorance or non-defined innocence. And that is absent totally only in the case of the Buddha. We have no time for this. And then, of course, to cut the story short, this search continued in early Mahayana Sutras and developed throughout is the major clue, right? Inspiring all Buddhists since the Buddha's time to search for the true wisdom of the Buddha. And therefore, that's why we say we have to directly discern the Buddha. Yeah. We may not be fully, perfectly understanding even the Buddha wisdom. Like Sariputta also exclaimed like this, in spite of him being the most achieved Arahat. But we have to continue this process. But this process started in the Pali Suttas. You can see Abhidhamma commentary, and finally Mahayana. And I take this as a major thread, major clue for the development of the so-called Mahayana. Right now, a bit more about the notion of acquiring panya and not intellectual knowledge. And I want to quote you very quickly, sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya called the Panya Sutta. Yeah? And then it says like that. First, to cut it short, you have to make a commitment and to find a teacher. You have to find a teacher. Commit yourself. And in ancient time, it means actually entering into a spiritual relationship with the teacher, and you stay with him, you live with him. That's one reason why I don't like making our courses just online courses and corresponding courses. I'm afraid that's not what I want. But of course, we allow some cases. Where there's a genuine reason. It says, Pari Sattanam Upanisaya Viharati. He dwells independent on the teacher. So it means he respects the teacher, he serves the teachers, and in that process he learns. He enters into relationships, a dynamic mutual interaction with the teacher. And there are some conditions, there are some prerequisites. Not imposed by a teacher, but the prerequisites that the learner, a learner like this, who is in search of wisdom, must possess. This is first, he must have love and respect to the teacher. Next, he must have a keen sense of moral shamefulness. The Pali word for this is a compound, hirottapa. That is, he must be morally sensitive. And this moral sensitivity arises as a result of being deeply inspired by the teacher's virtues and knowledge in the Dharma. Then, next, he must proceed to transform his living, to change his lifestyle in all respects accordingly as the Dhamma that has been learned. So, transformation as a result of creative learning, creative education of the Dhamma involves necessarily also a change of lifestyle, a change of value structure. Sometimes you hear people saying that they offer you a form of meditation, and then meditation is a technique, and they emphasize on the technique. And they say that as long as you have the right technique, everything will be looked after. And everything that follows will be fine spiritually, and you will progress spiritually. And that is not the Buddhist view. You have to commit yourself to live without indulging yourself as before. You have to change your lifestyle. You have to change your spiritual values. And this leads to, of course, the next prerequisite, that he then becomes exclusively devoted to his practice and relinquished all forms of social entanglement. His life must be simplified more and more, and he must be less and less attached, entangled in all the social relationships. And finally, importantly, he must practice meditation. So the last one is meditative practice. And this is because to truly transform himself, he must have, as I have explained earlier, true insight into himself, into his shortcomings, into higher possibilities. So all this can only take place at the deep level of meditational experience. So he must enter into actual meditation practice. The text says, this sutta says, that he finally now develops insight into the impermanence of the khandhas. This is insight. That is the five aggregates as being impermanent, as arising and ceasing, and also insight that this commotion of arising and ceasing, this dukkha, can be appeased, and that appeasement is the goal of his spiritual practice. So, to say the least, these requisites that we see in this Panya Sutta are far beyond those for a modern academic student. Here I give you, in the slides, there are more details, but we don't want to go to all these textual details too much to frighten you away from these languages, although I emphasize languages. But just to tell you that there's a text like this, in the Anguttara Nikaya, it's called Vimuktayatana. Ayatana, yeah. It's Vimuktiyatana. Pali will become Vimuktayatana, which means the basis of liberation. We want liberation, and you are liberated only when you are integrated. Yeah, when you are harmonized. Yeah, so it speaks of 5 bases. And we don't have time to go through all this, but to tell you that if you are interested, you look into this particular textual reference. Let me just summarize and to more or less a little translation of the first one, and you will get a clear idea of what they are getting at about this base of liberation. So it's like this. The first one says, a teacher, he teaches the Dhamma to a bhikkhu. So this is teaching. This is Buddhist studies. This is intellectual. You might even say this is academic. In the manner the teacher teaches the Dhamma, in that very manner he comes to gain direct insight. So, but the teaching is no ordinary teaching. The teaching is an inspiration. The teaching, the listening to the teaching rather, is a spiritual practice. It's meditation. It should be. That's the ideal. To what extent it is, that depends on ourselves, largely. So in the manner that you teach of Dhamma, in that very manner it comes again to the insight. If your insight comes like this, so what does it involve? For instance, it involves receptivity, it involves faith, commitment. You know, you are motivated towards liberation from the human predicament. You want to, like the Buddha, he wanted to find a solution to transcend impermanence. You have to be motivated like this. This is what is called, for instance, by some psychotherapists and psychologists like Abraham Maslow, what he calls meta motivation. You want to be meta motivated. You don't want to be just motivated by basic need of food and clothing and sex and all this. Yeah?
These basic needs are not denied, but a human being should develop the higher motivations, should go for higher values, should be aware, should be sensitive, should be mindful that there are higher states to get into, higher levels to attain. And these higher levels are more blissful, more meaningful. Then all these other things, even your basic needs, will become less important. You can't deny them, yeah, but you exist happily, even if you have conflicts in respect of your basic needs. So, this is the way we should learn the Dhamma. Today we have lost, I have said in my teaching, in my classes, we have lost the art of listening to Dhamma. Especially through Zoom and online. So that's why I'm basically not in favor of that. Because now I'm kind of making a compromise because there's an objective reason for me to do that during the COVID period. But I don't like to see Dhamma being preached just through online. People say, argue with me, yes, if you do like that, you benefit the whole of the world. Yeah, it's true. How do I benefit it? By listening? With a cup of coffee on your sofa? And turning on your recording and, It's quite different from like the way you are there and you are listening, you put in effort, you feel, you interact, at least in your mind, with the preacher, with the teacher. Yeah? So people have lost, Buddhists have lost their art of listening. Again, there's a lot more I can say, but today I don't have time, but I suggest you, now many of my talks and Dharma expositions are available online, recorded by my students, sometimes against my will, but they do some good also, and you can see them, you can get them in YouTube. So, in the very manner that he listens, he comes to gain, that's the important thing is to gain direct insight. The direct insight is my translation from Patisangvedi. Pati represents the idea of direct, facing towards, much like Abhi, Samvedi. So the direct penetration and knowing, direct insight, I would say, as somebody has translated it as the inspiration, that's a good word also, into the meaning of the Dhamma. You don't just listen to the analysis of the Pali grammar or Sanskrit grammar of the words, but even in analyzing it grammatically, you should feel inspired. How beautiful this word is derived. How important it is as a Buddhist teaching, how profound a meaning it conveys. You should have that kind of feeling. So if you do like that, you gain direct insight into the meaning, the Dhamma, the artha of the Dhamma, and the meaning and the Dhamma. First step, you listen. You begin by learning. Begin by Buddhist studies, right? Then it goes on. To him, so gaining direct insight, joyousness arises. This is my translation of pamucca. Or you can just say joy. I just want to reflect the abstract now form. So when you gain insight, you don't gain fear. You confess to God and you want God to forgive you, and you feel fear that God might not accept you, or you are not forgiven, and then you have exposed your own sinfulness to the priest, or you out of fear of being punished by God, you want to confess. That is not the case of Buddhist confession. So, the Mahayana rituals of repentant confession are extremely important, extremely meaningful. It depends on how you understand them, not just as mere rituals. Again, much can be said about the whole the psychological significance of confession. But today we don't have time. But anyway, so learning like that, joy arises in you. You feel happy. Oh, I gain insight in the Buddha. It's more than just intellectual joy, it's just joyousness. And to him who is joyful, next thing is rapture arises. What is piti? Rapture means the kind of excited happiness. You simply get so excited about it. That's called priti. Yeah? To him, having this kind of priti, a rapturous mind, the body becomes tranquil. That's very important. You are physically appeased, physically harmonized. So integration and harmonization involve the physical aspect, the body aspect, and that affects the influences the mental aspect. It has two aspects. So first is this harmony of the body. Yeah. The word I translate for tranquility is a very important. This is called pasapati, shrub. Sanskrit you have prasapti, ching-an. You know, ching-an has become a very, very important concept in meditation. Since early Buddhism, through Abhidhamma, prasapti is very, very important. Yeah, it's a spiritual experience in meditation. So I called it, I call the term bodily integration. Yeah, with the body tranquilized, then he experienced what we call sukha, bliss. So you see that mental happiness comes from, this also involves all forms of happiness, is based on the integration, the bodily integration, as I call it. Yeah, and all this comes from first listening to the Dhamma, being inspired by the Dhamma, and then gaining insight into the Dhamma. Right? And then next, you see, to him who is blissful, yeah, the mind becomes, this is the word, samadhiyati. Not the mind become concentrated. He's equipoised. He's, in other words, now mentally integrated through physical bodily integration. The body and mind are not, two separate entities in Buddhism. They interact one on the other. So the mind becomes integrated, the mind becomes equipoised. I use a different term here, and this is clearly in Pali you see samadhiyati. This is what they call it's a good example of a denominative from samadhi, and you form the verb. Then so now in the Pali text it stops here. That also signifies something. Finally is integration. This is the last part, is samadhi. Just like as I pointed out to you, in the case of the Noble Eightfold Path, the last one is samadhi. So it cannot be just simply a matter of having some concentration in your mind. You attain a state of perfect integration of body and mind, of all your psychic energies are fully harmonized, integrated, unified, on the basis of which wisdom unfolds. So when the next round, when you come to, Noble Path is like a spiral. You come to round by round, you go higher and higher. You spiral up. You see. So the next round, your samadhi is certainly much more than just intellectual understanding. Yeah, and it's the spiritual insight, and that spiritual insight can be higher and higher and higher until their samadhi is actually panya, like in the case of the Buddha. Yeah. So the Pali text significantly stops here, and the Sanskrit text elaborates. And maybe the Sanskrit condition, the tradition thinks that maybe it should be elaborated a bit more. Yeah. Why samadhi is so important? And it goes on to say, equipoise, he knows and sees truly. If you know a little bit of Pali and Sanskrit, I recommend you to remember this phrase: Samahita chitto yatha bhutang prajanati. Samahita chitto is adjective. This chitto is not a noun. It's a bahuvrihi. One whose chitta, whose mind is integrated, is unified, is harmonized, sees truly, prajanati. And in fact, not just janati, but prajanati. See profoundly, truly, yatha ru shi zhi jian. I give you the Chinese term because you understand it better. Yeah? So it is from samadhi, in this sense, in the sense of complete harmonization and unification of all your psychic energies, that you come to gain prajna, that is seeing things truly as they are. Yeah, when you get inside seeing things truly as they are, you can become disgusted. Of course, this is just a translation, a fairly literal. The more literal meaning is you turn away. In other words, you 放下. You can just drop. This is not a negative state. It's a happy state. You don't force yourself. Oh, I lose something. No, you've happily, peacefully drop. Yeah, then you become. Then from there you become detached. That's a true idea of detachment. So disgusted, he is detached. Nirvit means to feel away from. Nirvit. Yeah. And being detached, you become liberated. This is your true freedom. You are no more conditioned, no more controlled by the object. That is true freedom. Not like the type of freedom you think when you go to the supermarket and say, yeah, that's good, I know this is best. Your knowledge has often been conditioned by all the advertisement you have read earlier, all the persuasion by the salesmen. Yeah? Then you come to supermarket and you see that same product on TV, you think that you have so cleverly, intelligently made the choice. That's not true freedom. Well, there is some amount of relative freedom, I don't deny that. But this is freedom in the sense of going beyond all conditionings. Yeah? And this is vimukti, mucchate. So this beautifully illustrates the process of integration. You can say the path of Vidyacarana, sampatti. Yeah? To summarize, so it goes like this. First, you learn what I call creatively. I want to emphasize that word. You don't just learn in a mechanical manner, mechanistical manner. You learn creatively. Yeah, I have said enough just now. Then, as a result, what you learn to acquire direct spiritual insight of the Dhamma. By the way, in Yogacara and the Mahayana Sangraha Sutta Samlun, it proposes a solution to the question as to how the mind of an ordinary being who had never been enlightened comes to be enlightened, and in which the pure or the outflow free is my translation for anasrava chitta, arises. When your whole alaya vijnana we know is one of defilements, the source of defilement. How can, in the midst of this alaya vijnana, of the very nature of defilement, how on earth can you have a pure mind arising? That's if you like, a theoretical or philosophical question. And Asanga solves that question. He explains that this is through what to use my word, creative learning, listening. The word is listening, yeah, because in ancient time you don't have text to read. You listen creatively, receptively, with respect, with the deep meta motivation to want to learn, to want to transform yourself. You go there not because you want to have an A in the exam or get a degree or pass the exam well. No, not that. Nothing wrong about that. I encourage you to get A's also, by the way. Huh? Yeah, but I mean, it's much, much more than that. You've got to be meta-motivated. Then it transforms you in the very midst of learning, listening. Yeah, so you acquire direct spiritual insight, and then we have seen that next joy will arise with you. So you come to a higher state of integration, relatively higher state of integration, you become more joyful. Joyful to great joy, excited joy, and then that joy is not lost. It's manifested in the form of tranquility. You see? And then this is least even as Sukha represents a higher, a subtle state of happiness. So see, the path of Buddhism is a path of happiness. This is a good illustration. Then you become, on the basis of this, you gain samadhi. You become equipoised. All your psychic energies are integrated, and then only you are able to see and know truly as things are. That is wisdom. Yeah, with the wisdom, then you can let go, and you can be free from conditionings, and you are transformed. The word transformation is very important, because I want to show that Buddhism is creative education. When you say something is creative, you mean you have a product that is not stereotyped, right? A brand new product. Otherwise, it's not creative. If you do a piece of art, you copy from another person, then it's not creative. But you produce something that had never been produced by others, a brand new product, then it is creative. So it's like this. An ordinary being, we are all the same. We are all conditioned by greed, hatred, ignorance, and so on. With all our imperfections, yeah, with all our existential sufferings. One day, when you begin to more and more unfold your inner potential as a human being, you come to the highest point. Then you become totally transformed. You are no more the same ordinary human being. You are no more fanfu. You are no more Puttajana. You are what is called an Arya. 就是转凡成圣. This is a transformation. The Sheng is a new, to use a word, again this borrowing from Western philosophical terminology. I talk so much about not being conditioned by the West, but sometimes there are good terms that we can borrow. So this is a new man, new human being. The Buddha is new man par excellence. He is the new man. But any Arya is also a new man, in contrast to an ordinary being. And this is the path of Vidyacarana. So I want to promote the idea to remind us that Buddhist studies, this is in the context of Buddhist study because I have been launching that program. We have to remember the ideal. What is the purpose of Buddhist studies? Of course, you can think of many rational reasons. Yeah, I talk about uplifting the standards of Buddhist studies among, especially I would say, the Chinese communities of Buddhists everywhere. I think we fall far behind compared to the Japanese, compared to the Westerners. Today we have to be more aware of it. Why can't we do it? We are capable of doing it, but first we must have awareness of it. We must be humble enough to know that we lag behind. Yeah? And look at the West. And I've said many times, I don't know how many of you have heard about my talk in Mandarin about Xuanzang, directed, I have emphasized that point, you see. We look at, for instance, in modern history, the translation of important Buddhist scriptures, whether it's Theravada or Mahayana. You look at the Dhammapada, it was not translated by Buddhists, less still by Asian Buddhist, less still by Asian bhikkhu or bhikkhuni. Yeah, the first translation was in Latin, by Westerner. And then all the great translation by, the Rhys Davids and the Pali Text Society, all these are Western scholars. And slowly, of course, you have a few, the Burmese and others joining in Sri Lankan, but they are actually a minority. And we look at the case of Mahayana Sutra. You know that all the important masters at the beginning were not translated by any Buddhist. Less still by Buddhist monk, bhikshus or bhikshuni. No. I look at, for instance, they are translated by whom? By not only Westerner, but Western Catholic fathers. Western Catholic fathers. We should feel ashamed. You know, they were great scholars. They were great Western scholars. I always admired them, and I always feel grateful to them. People like Levi, the Belgian tradition, the French tradition, people like his disciple de la Vallée-Poussin, like Lamotte, you know, and all these people. They translated, for instance, Mahayana Sangraha, the Abhidharmakosa Bhashya, and Xuanzang Chengwei Shi Lun. All these were done by Westerners, Western Catholic fathers. Can't we catch up? Shouldn't we catch up? Yeah. But another thing that I admire about these examples is that as far as I know, they were very sincere and profound practitioners themselves in their religions. Maybe some of them have become Buddhists in the heart. But the way when you read their reading, you feel that they're writing with a lot of feeling from within. They're not just analyzing as an academician. You know, there are academicians like that, and sometimes there can be very nasty ones. Like Keith is one example. He sees nothing great about Buddhism, although he studies Buddhism and Indologies and so on, but he wants to always catch a chance to belittle, to criticize. Oh, there's nothing profound, nothing deep, nothing great. And then there are examples of Christian missionaries who worked in China. For instance, the person who translated Timothy Richard, who translated the Awakening of Faith in the Mahayana, Tatsang Qi Xing Lun. Today it's available online. You can look at it. Horrible distortion, of the profound Mahayana teachings. And basically what he wants to say is that whatever is profound, this text he say very, very profound, right? And whatever that is profound there are all Christian teachings. Yeah, the Tathagata is translated as the Messiah, and Zhenru. You know how he translates Zhenru? Who can remember? Zhenru is Tathata, or there are many other terms. Reality. He translates that as the true model. Capital T, capital M. Do you get what I mean? God creates man in his own image. That is ultimate reality in Buddhism. That's Zhenru. That's how he understands. That's how he distorts the message of awakening of faith in the Mahayana. It's so unfortunate. And he claims that he gained the support of the Shanghai Buddhist leaders, because these people didn't understand what he was doing, and they didn't understand English enough. And so they were so happy that a foreigner, a missionary, wants to learn and translate their scriptures. These men exploited the Buddhists, abused their kindness. So today we have to uplift our own standard, and we have to vow to expound the profound teachings of the Buddhist traditions, the Buddhist scriptures, and to translate them. Even if we don't have time to produce a whole text translation, we translate the important materials like these great people like Hussein and others have done. But at the same time, we also see, as I said, these great examples, the few Catholic fathers I've just mentioned, they see the greatness that they remain steadfast as spiritually committed practitioners. We should be like that. We should feel like this. Yeah? And that's why I promote the idea of Vidyacarana.
I like also to highlight the second base of liberation out of the 5 bases. And this consists not in learning or listening, but in teaching the Dhamma, the doctrines that has been creatively learned and mastered. In this case, the teacher doesn't teach as a mere job. He doesn't teach out of a sense of duty or obligation, and not academically, but his teaching becomes his very spiritual practice. And in the process of teaching in this way, he comes to acquire direct spiritual insight. I shall here give 2 illustrations, one from the Pali sources, the other from the Sanskrit sources. The first is found in a beautiful, important text of the Theravada entitled Milinda Panha. Here, the Venerable Nagasena, a spiritually gifted and highly intelligent young monk, is given a dana by an old lady who is very devout and sincere. She says to Nagasena like this: "Dear Nagasena, I'm old. Please give me a profound anumodana," that is a thanksgiving sermon, in the form of a profound Dhamma discourse. And we may note here her existential anguish in the beginning statement of her request, "I am old." And Nagasena accepted her request and preached to her. And it is said that by the very force of the truths he himself had practiced, he has preached, Nagasena came to acquire spiritual insight. Or more literally, according to the Pali, he arrived at spiritual insight, liberative insight. The word here is vipassana, when reflecting on the Dhamma preached by himself at the end. And this reflection is not an ordinary intellectual reflection. The word involved is pachavekkhana, that is deep, direct, meditative contemplation and reflection. So as a result of his own teaching, he is so deeply inspired that he comes to acquire spiritual insight. The second illustration is from the Sanskrit text entitled Ashoka Avadana, Legends of King Ashoka. In this case, a very attractive, sensuous courtesan by the name of Vasava Tatta was passionately attached to the handsome, intelligent Upagupta, longing to meet him. And she sent words to Upagupta requesting him to come. But Upagupta refused because he was not at all inclined passionately towards this lady. To cut the story short, through a mess-up affair, this courtesan ended up dismembered. On the occasion, Upagupta then reflected like this: previously, she wished to see me for sensuous reason, and of course I refused. I declined. But now her limbs are cut off, and this is time for me to see her. Then she went to where this lady, this courtesan, was, and then said to her like this, I have not come to see you impelled by desire, but I've come to see the intrinsic nature of desires and impurities. That is to say, I have come to paraphrase, gain insight into the very nature of desires and impurities. And he then continued with a stanza, inspiring stanza, spoken to the courtesan. I shall quote just a part of it. Seeing form beautiful on the outside, a fool is attracted to them. Knowing them as corrupt on the inside, a steady man remains indifferent. Vasava Datta, that the condition, humbled, began to recollect the Buddha's virtues and requested Upakupta to teach her the words of the Buddha. Upakupta did accordingly, beginning with a gradual discourse. That is, a discourse that goes step by step to greater and greater profundity into the Dhamma, beginning with the Dana doctrine, etc. Coming to an understanding of the intrinsic nature of a body, Upakupta then became disgusted while he was himself teaching, and he gained direct insight into the truths of his teaching. The word for direct insight here is abhisamaya, which is from abhi, sam, and e, which conveys the meaning of direct, full understanding, full insight. E here is understanding. That's the root of the word. Abhi signifies direct. Sam signifies completeness, fullness. So he gained direct insight into the truth of his teaching, and then he attained the fruit of non-returnership. And the courtesan also, on that occasion, attained stream entry. So in this example, both the preacher and the listener are deeply inspired by the Dhamma because of the sincerity of both of them, and both came to be transformed, came to acquire spiritual insight. And this is a good illustration of what we call creative education, Dhamma as creative education. So I hope I have brought up a few points. Let me summarize. One is that if we want to understand the Buddha's Dhamma and teaching, we must go directly to the Buddha, to discern the Buddha and his Dhamma. Yeah? And this means, among other things, we have to go far beyond all the sectarian boundaries. We have to directly discern the Buddha. Okay? And we see that the attainment of the wisdom is not intellectual knowledge. It's not accumulation of intellectual knowledge. But it's nothing less than the liberative insight. We can't be perfect where we are. We have to recognize our own level, our own situation. But we must continue to be inspired, to be reminded of this ideal of the Dhamma as creative education.